por ejemplo, con el desarrollo de colecciones electrónicas para el servicio. Previamente a esto, él fue vicepresidente de planeación de nuevos productos y antes de esa actividad fue director ejecutivo de los contenidos de WorldCat en OCLC y de acceso global. Actualmente, con toda esta experiencia que ha aglutinado, tanto en los negocios y como en los aspectos técnicos, es responsable de los servicios de la biblioteca y de la industria para el futuro, como podrían ser, por ejemplo, los retos tecnológicos, como podría ser, pues ya no tan el futuro de Biblioteca 2.0, pero para México sigue siendo todavía un buen reto, así como otros productos de liderazgo, sobre todo atendiendo a los aspectos de contenido. Sin más preámbulo, Chip, muchísimas gracias. Thank you very much for being here with us. Va a presentar su conferencia.
Good morning. Just getting my watch. Buenos dias. I'm learning slowly, very slowly. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I appreciate. Yeah, thank you. Very good. I appreciate the chance to share with you my thoughts about the future of collection management for university libraries. I apologize in advance for my lack of Spanish language skills and for my North American orientation. OCLC, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking a little bit about OCLC to give you a sense for my organizational perspective. OCLC is a nonprofit member organization whose mission is to connect people to the collections and services of the library community. Our vision is of a global library network that helps the members of OCLC improve their service delivery to their patrons and facilitates the sharing of knowledge. OCLC serves its members in the three ways shown on the screen. We manage shared data resources on behalf of our members. We manage a technical and service infrastructure they use to help them do their work. And we engage with the community and provide research to the community in support of their work. WorldCat, a union catalog of thousands of libraries around the world, is our largest shared data asset. The WorldCat database has been creating system-wide efficiencies for libraries since 1971. Today, WorldCat contains more than 239 million records and more than 1.75 billion location listings. In the last 12 months, libraries using WorldCat have added more than 44 million records to the database. It's interesting to note that it took the OCLC Cooperative 31 years to add the first 51 million records to the database. A good portion of WorldCat's growth in the past several years has been in records describing materials published in languages other than English. 11 years ago, 36% of the records in WorldCat were non-English. Today, well over half are in non-English. 8.9 million records in WorldCat describe materials in Spanish. This slide provides a broad overview of the Mexican presence in the WorldCat database. There are over 1 million records describing materials published in Mexico and over 2.1 million holdings on these records among Mexican libraries. Of the 1.1 million records describing materials published in Mexico, about 780,000 are original cataloging records. They were added for the first time because Mexican libraries added them. And about 1 million holdings have been added to those records. So this is a very significant contribution to the database. OCLC aggregates data about many other kinds of content besides books, of course. Recently, we've been focused on digital content, particularly articles, e-books, and archival materials. Libraries around the world rely on OCLC infrastructure to catalog, share, and provide access to their collections. One of the ways that we advance the future of libraries is through research that we share with the global library community. The Office of Research was founded in 1978. OCLC research staff are committed to the agenda that you see on the screen. The staff in the OCLC research department number about 15, and they provide the OCLC Cooperative with an infrastructure and an interactive process for helping libraries, museums, and archives deal with the rapidly changing digital global community. OCLC is governed by its member libraries. A member of OCLC is any library that agrees to contribute intellectual content to the OCLC cooperative or share resources with it. A member can participate in the governance of OCLC through one of 3 regional councils. There are currently 3 Latin American representatives on the council, and we're in the process of setting up an advisory council for Mexico. On to my talk. The purpose of this conference is to imagine the library 15 years from now. Before looking ahead, I wanted to look back 15 years to 1996 or thereabouts. Doing this could give us a sense of what's to come. In 1996, the web was a much different place than it is now. There were only 100,000 websites in 1996 versus 160 million websites today. Netscape was the top web browser. Google didn't exist, which is hard to imagine. There was no Wikipedia, there were no e-books, and there were no social networks, no Facebook, no Twitter. In short, 15 years ago on the web was a supplement to what people did offline. In 1996, the library was also a much different place than it is now. We had a number of online reference databases and some aggregated full-text journals. Our catalogs were just moving to the web. We had no institutional repositories. We had no e-books, no mass digitization. We had no digital archives. Open URL resolvers had not been introduced yet. There was no link resolution to full text online. There was no federated searching, and there was no web-scale discovery. In short, the library infrastructure 15 years ago consisted largely of the traditional integrated library system. The library's digital collection consisted mostly of reference databases. Scholars did most of their work offline and supplemented it with the web. I also took a look at the library literature to see what experts were saying about the future of libraries in 1996. One author, Carlin Rushoff, writing in the Journal of Academic Librarianship in 1997, seemed particularly well attuned to the future. As I read Carlin's article, I couldn't help but conclude that a number of the basic issues confronting libraries have remained largely the same over the last 15 years. I then took a look at more recent publications to see what the experts were saying about what the library might look like in 2025 and beyond. There were 2 studies in particular that caught my attention, one by JISC, a group in the UK, the United Kingdom, and then another one in the United States. It was published by ACRL. There were 3 trends that came out. The first one was user self-sufficiency. No need to search, resources discovered without libraries, the physical library less visible and necessary. Second was the all-digital collection. All published content in digital form, special collections have been digitized, open access business models are pervasive. And the third was that the university and the library would be online. All students would be non-traditional and make their own curriculum as they needed to. Traditional departments in universities would be replaced by niche social networking on an ad hoc basis. So at this point I thought, maybe I'm finished. Maybe this is the library of the future. It'll be the shortest presentation I've ever given. And then I remembered one of my favorite quotes by Peter Drucker. Trying to predict the future is like trying to drive down a country road at night with no lights while looking out the back window. So I paused and considered what's going on in the world around us, and decided that there are 3 things that we're grappling with today and have to grapple with that will determine our future. The first is the end user. We're in an end user world, and we have to figure out how to put the library collection and service in the flow of the user. The second is continuing to manage the shift of library collections from their physical form to their digital form. And the third is web-scale collaboration among libraries as they try to do the work in numbers 1 and 2. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on each of these. A lot of the changes that we're seeing are driven by the changing expectations and habits of our customers, the library patrons. Back when I was in graduate school studying literature about 400 years ago, we went to the library to learn how to do research and to access the books and journals that contain that research. Today, of course, information's online. Students come to the library online, and they expect the library to fit into a workflow that they've already created for themselves. A recent survey of college students in the United States commissioned by OCLC bears out this point. In 2005, 92% of college students reported that they begin their information search with a search engine. Less than 1% indicated that they started their search for information on a library website. In 2010, they were still strongly tied to search engines as a starting point for information. Not a single survey respondent said they began their search for information on a library website. Although no one starts their search at a library website, more than half of college students use library websites. This is a bit of a drop from 5 years ago. So what's going on? This research suggests that the interface to scholarly information is often not the library portal. Researchers are increasingly shifting their activity to freely available academic search engines. What all of these services have in common is that they provide free search direct to the consumer without library mediation. Some also provide free content. Many have mechanisms for authenticating library users using IP address and other means in order to show users the content they're entitled to access from the library's collection. In this paradigm, the user finds the library through search engines of his or her choice and expects the library to have done the work in the background to enable access to digital resources. So what is the impact on the library of this change? A recent report by library staff at the University of Minnesota documents the impact of this shift. It shows the library catalog is still being used, but Google is the single greatest source of traffic to library resources. The link resolver is now used as frequently as catalogs and websites, and more than 75% of the requests to the link resolver originate externally to the library's website. The OCLC Perceptions Report also highlights the extent to which college undergraduates have replaced library reference materials with online alternatives. The report indicates that use of Wikipedia is up to 88% of college students. It has effectively replaced many physical reference materials. Use of Ask an Expert sites such as Yahoo Answers has more than doubled in 5 years, reaching 52% of all college students in 2010. The rapid growth of social networking sites is remarkable. According to Mary Meeker, a venture capitalist and well-known internet analyst, as of June 2011, the time spent on social networking sites exceeded that spent in web portals for the first time. And this trend is global. On average, according to Meeker, Mexican citizens spend 7.4 hours per month on social networking sites, compared to only 6.8 hours for Americans. Chileans spend over 10 hours a month on social networking sites. As our patrons move their search and their reference activity online, they are also beginning to move the research process itself there. In the past few years, a number of citation management companies have appeared online. Some of them are listed here. These tools make it easy for students and researchers to create bibliographies and format them. More recently, they've begun to offer additional services to help researchers actually write papers. Mendeley offers a service that includes the ability to manage bibliographies, collaborate with other researchers, and rate and recommend papers. EasyBib is a similar service aimed at undergraduate. It began as a simple citation formatting site, but has recently introduced an online service to help students take notes, create outlines, and write papers. The growth of these sites is phenomenal. Virtual research environments, or VREs, are another area of growth. In VREs, researchers conduct their work online. myexperiment.org is an example of a VRE. It includes a social networking site for scientists where they can collaborate and share ideas for experimental workflows with others in their own or related disciplines. So given all of this change on the consumer web, how do patrons view the library? When comparing libraries to search engines, overwhelmingly, American college students consider search engines to be more convenient, faster, more reliable, and easier to use. But they consider libraries to be more trustworthy and more accurate. While college students ranked libraries ahead of search engines in trustworthiness and accuracy, this distinction decreases when they're asked about the information that is provided by search engines and libraries. Only 43% of college students say that information from library resources is more trustworthy than that provided by search engines. For those students who use libraries and librarians, they recognize the value that librarians add to the search process. More than 3/4 of college students who have used a librarian agree that the librarian adds value to the search process. Popular activities among college student library users continue to include borrowing books and leisure reading. Nearly half of the college students surveyed go to the library at least once a year for leisure reading. Borrowing books continues to be among top activities, with 28% of students borrowing print books monthly and 60% borrowing them at least once per year. Once the library website is found, it is used. About 83% of students doing research begin with a search engine. 27% of those end up at a library website. Of that 27%, 99% find what they're looking for. So there's value there, it's just getting them to that value. At OCLC, we've been working for the past several years on finding ways to connect web users to library collections and services. In this example, the user is looking for information on Google Books. From the record describing this book, there's a Find in a Library link. This link takes the user to worldcat.org, and from there the user can find a nearby library and get into the library's catalog. In a more direct example, HathiTrust, a large digital repository, syndicates its records out across the web. Here the user has been searching for a Thai title. They find it in the Google search engine, and because it's in the public domain, they can get it directly. Another interesting example is Oxford University, which makes almost 2,000 content resources available from iTunes U. The new content is loaded regularly, and it is free to download and watch and listen. Items from this collection are downloaded about 130,000 times a week. Users of the content come from 85 countries. Oxford has had over 10 million downloads of this content since they made it available. In a similar move, the Smithsonian Institution libraries have put their Portraits of Scientists set on Flickr. These photographs of 19th and early 20th century scientists and inventors have been available on Smithsonian Library's website since 2003. They're very popular on that website, but in the first 3 months they were available on Flickr, they were used more than they had been in the previous 5 years on the Smithsonian website. Recently, Overdrive, an ebook company located in Ohio, the state that I'm from in the United States, launched a joint project with Amazon to support the lending of library books purchased through Overdrive on Amazon Kindle. There's currently a collection of about 20,000 books. When you're ready to check out, if you have an Amazon account, you're asked to log in. Once you've done that, you can just download the book and you get it for a couple of weeks. Libraries can also integrate their services into popular social networking sites. Run by public libraries in Scotland, Enquire is a free 24-hour online reference service that gives users a chance to interact directly with a librarian through the medium of online chat. In 2008, Enquire became a knowledge partner for the Yahoo Answers service and scores consistently the best answer as judged by the questioners themselves. Now I'd like to turn my attention for the second part of my talk to the shift of the library collection itself from physical to electronic. OCLC Research developed the collections grid, which you see on the screen, as a simple way to represent an increasingly complex universe of library collections. The grid provides a framework for these collections of content. It divides collection materials into 4 general categories, each representing a distinct group of resources. The upper left quadrant illustrates published information, which includes books, magazines, and newspapers, scholarly journals, videos and music, etc. These materials can be in print or electronic format. The lower left quadrant, special collections, includes rare books, local and historical newspapers, local history materials, and the like. The lower right quadrant, institutional content is where learning and research materials dwell. These include courseware, learning objects, e-portfolios, e-prints, and the like. And then the final quadrant is open web content, which includes freely accessible websites, open source software, news groups, archives, and images. In the area of published content, we're seeing change on two significant dimensions. First, we appear to be reaching a tipping point, moving toward an all-digital collection. Second, there's very strong and growing interest among academic universities to decrease the size of their physical collection. This chart, derived from the National Clearinghouse on Educational Statistics, shows the actual decline in spending on physical books and journals and the growth in spending on their electronic counterparts among American libraries through 2008. Projecting these trends forward, it appears that the spend on electronic journals and books will equal the spend on their print counterparts in the next few years. Within the next 15 years, it appears that the spend on print will be insignificant. This scatter diagram, derived from ARL annual statistics, is equally telling. It shows that many academic research libraries in North America already spend more on electronic collections than they do on physical materials. Even more compelling is the large number of institutions whose spend on electronic is more than 60% of their materials budget. A few, Auburn, Wayne State, and Alberta, spend more than 80% of their materials budget on electronic materials today. As more libraries shift to electronic collections, there's a shrinking pool of libraries who are capable of dealing with large print collections. We're also finally beginning to see some real uptake in ebooks. According to the consulting firm Outsell, the total global market for scholarly and professional books is roughly $13 billion a year. As this graph shows, the scholarly and professional book market will not grow much through 2013, just over 1% per year, reaching $13.4 billion. As the blue portion of the bars indicate, ebook sales will grow substantially during this period, from 3.2% of the total to about 17% of the total spend in 2013. If we project this trend forward, it's easy to see that in the next 5 years or so, roughly half of what libraries spend on books will probably be for digital. And another 10 years out, it will dominate. As ebooks have taken hold in academic libraries, ebook vendors and publishers have developed many new pricing models. Some of the most popular are listed on the screen, and they range from title purchase to buying whole collections to patron-driven acquisition, where if the patron selects the book, the library pays. Short-term access is more recent. That's where the library pays for the use of the book for a week or two instead of buying the book. The implication of these shifting business models on libraries is profound. What we're seeing is that the decisions about what goes into the collection are beginning to shift away from the library to either the supplier or in some cases to the patron, and also budgeting, materials budget across these different options is quite complex. Another big issue, and I know this was a topic for this conference a few years ago, is the open access publishing model. A few weeks ago, I was at the Frankfurt Book Fair in Germany, and I attended a one-day conference of the International Association of Scientific, Technical, and Medical Publishers. The conference was focused on the shift to open access business models and how journal publishers will accommodate this transition. And they are very seriously moving in this direction. Most of them do have open access journals. In addition, new publishing models are emerging. PLOS, the Public Library of Science, for instance, is a large and rapidly growing open access publishing platform or mega journal. In 2011, PLOS had more than 14,000 publications, and it became the largest peer-reviewed journal in the world. The contents of PLOS now representing roughly 1.5% of PubMed. Another big trend that we're grappling with, of course, is the emergence of several major repositories of digitized books from legacy library collections. Major collections are shown on this slide, led, of course, by Google Books, HathiTrust, and the Internet Archive. As you can see from this table, these digital libraries contain a very large volume of content and are growing rapidly. What these efforts share in common is that the content they host is derived from library collections. This explains OCLC's interest in them. Digitization comes from a variety of methods, either the Google Books Library Project, Internet Archive scanning, or local library scanning activity. And as these books are digitized, they cover more and more of what's on the shelves in academic libraries. This graph shows the growing coverage of academic research library collections in North America within HathiTrust. Between 2009 and 2011, median duplication between HathiTrust and academic library collections grew from 19 to 36%. It will be more than 50% in the next year. As this percentage climbs, universities are increasingly looking for ways to reduce duplicate storage of little-used physical titles by working collaboratively. Constance Malpass, an OCLC Research Program Officer, recently published a report on crowdsourced research collections that has been reverberating throughout the academic community. The researchers in this report examined the feasibility of outsourcing the management of low-use print books held in academic libraries to shared service providers, including large-scale print and digital repositories. The new report provides empirical data that will be useful to research libraries in their future planning activities. We're now beginning to see companies entering this area, offering services to help libraries make data-driven decisions about which titles to remove from their circulating collection or from their library altogether. One of these companies, SCS, uses WorldCat and a variety of other data sources to provide libraries with reports showing them where they can eliminate titles from their collection with little risk. A number of issues shown on this slide need to be worked out in order for libraries to be able to move to a consolidated shared print repository system. The bibliographic infrastructure needs to be worked out. Business models for the shared repositories need to be worked out. Rights management, of course, is a huge issue in this area. And then risk tolerance for deselection. It's a hard thing for a university library to get rid of physical content. Now I'll turn my attention to the grid's upper right quadrant, which illustrates resources available on the web to anyone. There's a growing collection of content online in the open web produced by researchers and scholars. This content is not managed or collected, and no library regime or apparatus exists to do this systematically or at scale. This increasingly important component of the scholarly record will need to be considered in the coming years. Another facet of open web content that is becoming increasingly important to our patrons is the rich store of supplemental content available on social reading sites. This screenshot is from Goodreads, the dominant social reading site in the world. Goodreads is now among the top 800 websites globally, according to Alexa.com. It's in the top 350 in the US, and I think it's in the top 1,000 in Mexico now. Libraries currently don't have robust tools for creating social networks around the books and other materials that they circulate. A few organizations are beginning to step into this area and think about providing libraries with a social networking platform that they can leverage to provide patrons with the same kinds of services they get from a Goodreads. In the area of resource guides and lists, LibGuides is a company that serves 2,000 libraries globally with a platform libraries can use to create reading lists and resource lists and share them both through the library portal and outside of the library's website in Google, Facebook, and Twitter. Here is the LibGuides site for Arizona State University. Resource guides can include online chat with the librarians, information about the librarians. There's also a very strong community component to LibGuides. Librarians can see each other's guides, they can collaborate with other librarians to create guides, and they can access templates created by others. Another example is EasyBib Research, which essentially is a searchable database of the millions of citations that students have created as they build bibliographies for their papers. You can go to EasyBib Research and search these citations to find web resources that are relevant to your research. Imagine doing something similar with scholars. And then finally, ConnectYard is a company that links students with the school's learning management system. And its technology is capable of creating a record of the discussions between students and faculty, students and each other, students and the librarians, regardless of whether the messages originate from text, Facebook, or Twitter. The lower left quadrant of the grid, special collections, include rare books, historical newspapers, local history materials, etc. These materials are often unique and very high maintenance. In this domain, the institutional focus moves from acquiring, managing, and distributing published materials to being a publisher and curator. Here's an example of one of these from Emory University. Many organizations have digital repositories. Digitization efforts over the last decade have been largely successful, but we're now in a new era. How do we leverage this work? Do we aggregate it to provide the most value to the community? Do we syndicate it into the user environment? OCLC aggregates special collections data. We currently incorporate this data into WorldCat and have done this with about 1,100 digital collections globally. We also offer a software package that libraries can use to synchronize their digital collections with WorldCat. Once in WorldCat, these collections are accessible through WorldCat, and they're also accessible through OCLC syndication partners. Here's an example of an item being found in Google. Another interesting project in this space is the merger of Fedora and DSpace, which happened fairly recently. They formed an organization called DuraSpace. DuraSpace is an independent not-for-profit whose goal is to help save the shared scholarly, scientific, and cultural record. DuraSpace launched a service called DuraCloud, which provides a hosted environment for managing a digital collection. And I think this approach will become quite popular and in fact, standard in the next few years. The final quadrant is institutional content, where for academic libraries, learning and research materials reside. Most institutional content is unique to the institution, and traditionally libraries have not managed it by formally collecting it or providing bibliographic control. But this is beginning to change. A number of universities now offer services and systems that are intended to help manage the research output of the university. Vivo is such a system developed and used by Cornell. Vivo brings together in one site publicly available information on the people, departments, graduate fields, facilities, and other resources that collectively make up the research and scholarship environment in all disciplines at Cornell. Here's another example of a similar service from Hong Kong University. And we're beginning to see movement in the commercial space. Thomson Reuters recently announced that it had developed a service called Research in View in partnership with The Ohio State University. Thomson advertises Research in View as a service that universities can use to aggregate, make searchable, and syndicate faculty service, teaching, research expertise, and accomplishments. And again, we go back to virtual research environments. There's plenty of institutional content in these that currently is not represented and curated outside of these websites. So the implications for collection management in this quadrant of the collections grid include, is it the library's role to manage the credentials and output of researchers and faculty? What about the research data itself? Who will curate that data? Best practices and standards in this area are just beginning to emerge. So a summary view, what we see from this quick tour of the collections grid is that the current investment pattern favors the published content. Special collections are important but secondary. Research outputs, or the institutional content, are gaining importance, but they're not as well funded or integrated. And web archiving of open web content is right now just an ad hoc effort. The big shift that's taking place in published content is the shift from the physical content to the digital content, and that will continue. In addition, we're beginning to see institutions paying more and more attention to the institutional content, particularly the research output. So what do we expect to see happen? We expect to see the investment in licensed content continue to grow over the next 5 to 10 years, and we expect to see significant investment in institutional content. Special collections we think will stay pretty much where they are today, and open web content we don't see anything happening of significance, so that could change, of course. I'll conclude my talk with a few comments about web scale collaboration. As this quote by Chris Anderson states, the web is about scale. about using centralized resources to lower costs and attract users. What this means for libraries is that if we want to be a meaningful part of the web, we too need to operate at web scale, and not just as individual institutions. Who might we think of being web scale? It's names that we know. These companies seem to have three things in common. They have infrastructure, they're in the cloud. They all have an aggregated mass of data. And then they have a large community of users that use their platform to interact with each other. Massive aggregations of data, community, and infrastructure. So how do libraries stack up against web scale? Libraries and other nonprofits in our space do have a long history of coming together nationally and internationally to address problems or realize opportunities at scale. I've listed just a few examples on this slide. There are, of course, many others. Today's environment, in fact, makes possible even deeper collaboration and even more powerful levels of collaboration. One example, and an area that OCLC has been working on over the past few years, is library back office infrastructure. Some folks at OCLC did some research to determine how many transactions there are in integrated library systems around the globe, and came up with the estimate that you see at the screen, on the screen. About 147 billion transactions a year, give or take a billion, I suppose. And these transactions boil down to roughly 5,000 transactions a second. Then system architects at OCLC studied what type of technology would be needed to support this rate of transactions, and found that it would be possible to do it with a small farm of commodity servers in the cloud if the software was appropriately architected. This meant starting with a completely clean slate as to how a library management system would be built. So OCLC software architects spent a year researching, analyzing, and creating this new architecture. The result of this work is a cloud-based library system built on WorldCat. This system includes all of the functions of a traditional integrated library system in the cloud built on the WorldCat platform. Since September of last year, about 40 libraries have acquired the WorldCat management system, and 22 of them have gone live. We have 3 installations outside of the US in Norway, in Canada, and in the Netherlands. What other areas lend themselves to web scale? The library back office is only the beginning. I've listed a few of those areas here. Once we're operating in the cloud, we can do many things with the data and analytics. Social networking is a huge opportunity, rights management, and of course, bibliographic control. So I hope that my talk has provided you with a perspective on some of the major trends affecting collection management in university libraries today. It's an exciting time to be involved in libraries and librarianship. And in closing, I'd like to share a quote with you from anthropologist Margaret Mead, who wrote, "Our future is neither predetermined nor predictable. It is rather something which lies within our hands, to be shaped and molded by the choices we make in the present time." At the beginning of my talk, I suggested that we can divine the future from past or current trends. What I hope my talk this morning has suggested is that the future is something we create each day as we do our work. By working together, I believe we can create a bright and vibrant future for academic libraries. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Chips. Tenemos 5 minutos para 1 o 2 preguntas, cuando mucho, o alguna participación. Sí, aquí al frente, por favor, y Gary, 2 nada más hecho. No, primero Gary y luego tú, José Miguel. translator does, please. Thank you.
I'll make this question in English so the translators can convert it to Spanish. First off, I congratulate you on the presentation. It was very thorough, an excellent overview, I thought. And what impressed me the most were the use of data to support some of your conjectures and views of what is happening. Here's my question, and it's rather specific. I'd like your thoughts about resolution of the digital rights issue and digital rights management, using as an example, say, the recent suit of the Authors Guild to the Hattie Trust libraries, because this obviously is a barrier, but probably not as big as we've seen it made up in the press. And I'd like your personal thoughts about that.
Thank you for the comments on the presentation, and excellent question. I was afraid that someone would ask me that question. My personal thoughts, and I am not an attorney, is that there is too much at stake for both the publishers and the providers of the content for a solution not to be reached. So I expect that a solution will be reached. I think that the recent suit against the Hattie Trust was triggered by the work that they tried to do on the orphans. Had they not done that, I don't think that suit would have been filed. You can ask John Wilkins if it was a good idea. I know John, and he has his purpose. So I think it will be resolved because of the investment that's been made. But I think that the copyright holders need to be paid for their intellectual property. So.
Muchas gracias. También encontré muy interesante.
Sorry.
Thanks. Me encontré muy interesante los puntos que trató. Mi pregunta también es específica. Mencionó bibliotecas que están implementando servicios de redes sociales propios. Yo quería saber si tiene alguna información sobre el impacto que están teniendo en sus comunidades, sobre todo en relación contra las redes sociales populares, digamos, las grandes, Facebook, Twitter, etcétera. ¿Qué tanto pueden competir contra la masificación, el alcance que tienen ya estas redes? Gracias.
Yes, this is another excellent question. So the question is really, social networking is extremely popular. Can the libraries compete with the large social networking companies? I think the answer to that question is no, and they should not try to. Instead, I think the libraries should seek to integrate their services in those social networks and reach their patrons that way. Yep. Okay, very good.